My name is Wynona Mendes. I'm the research lead at the Workforce Planning Board of Grant Erie. The EmployerOne survey is a survey that the Workforce Planning Board of Grant Erie has been conducting for about 10 years at this point to try and understand the employment landscape through the perspective of employers. Since 2014, we've asked employers things about their hiring needs, their retention needs, their hard-to-fill positions, and what supports that they need from community organizations and government to navigate the challenges that they're experiencing with employment. Our goal is to constantly keep a pulse on local employment through understanding what employers' needs are, and that's exactly what EmployerOne is about. So in January 2023, the Workforce Planning Board of Grant Erie conducted the EmployerOne survey for the first time in 3 years since the pandemic. And the results do tell us in very simple terms that the world of work is changing. We've seen that the proportion of businesses that have hard-to-fill positions increased significantly since right before the pandemic, as did the proportion of businesses that were experiencing people quitting. And that tells us that the landscape has changed, and along with that, employers need more specific hiring and retention supports. When we started conducting the survey in 2014, the proportion of businesses that rated the availability of qualified workers as excellent or good was about 50%. And in 2023, we saw that number decrease to about 30%. And inversely, we saw the number of businesses that rated the availability of qualified workers as fair or poor increase to about 70%. And that really does tell us that businesses are becoming increasingly frustrated with the availability of qualified workers in the region. We asked employers whether they anticipate hiring in the next year, and we found that the proportion of businesses that anticipate hiring has remained somewhat consistent since pre-pandemic levels. But the reason for anticipated hiring has changed. So unlike 5 years ago, where the main reason for anticipated hiring was to expand their businesses, this year we found that the main reason was to fill vacancies. And this is really reflected in the data that we see on anticipated hiring by sector. So sectors like accommodation and food services, manufacturing and healthcare that are experiencing a labor shortage are also the sectors that anticipate the most hiring in the upcoming year. The main reason why a lot of employers say that positions are hard to fill really did vary from sector to sector. So we found that sectors that typically hire a higher proportion of lower skilled workers, those sectors were telling us that the main reason that positions were hard to fill was because of insufficient number of applicants or simply candidates not showing up for their interviews. Amongst businesses that typically require a more specialized skill set or higher qualifications, we found that the main reason for hard-to-fill positions was often credited to lack of qualifications or work experience amongst the candidates that were applying. We asked businesses how hiring and retention within their organization has changed over the last few years, and we found that about 1 in 4 businesses are experiencing more difficulties with hiring and retention because they are unable to offer competitive wages. And we also found that about 1 in 5 businesses were experiencing hiring and retention challenges because of undesirable work hours. We found that about 2 in 3 businesses said that as a result of hiring and retention challenges, they've had to transfer their responsibilities to existing staff members. And of course, that results in increased levels of stress and burnout amongst those that have to now take on all this additional workload. So we found that a number of businesses, particularly in sectors that require specialized skill sets, were finding it difficult to hire because of a lack of qualifications or work experience amongst their candidates. So we see that there is a role for Grant Erie's universities, colleges, and community service organizations to play in developing and making accessible more short-term specific training that caters towards filling those employment gaps. We learned through our EmployerOne survey that a lot of businesses that are calling people back into the workforce are doing so because their managers find it difficult to manage workers remotely. Employees value remote work and are actively seeking opportunities to work either entirely or partially remotely. And so there is a case for businesses to focus on either managerial training or productivity tools that can better support flexible working arrangements. This year, we decided to focus a little bit more on understanding equity, diversity, and inclusion needs amongst workplaces in Grand Erie. Amongst organizations that have members of equity-seeking groups on their management team, we found that those businesses were slightly more likely to pursue equity, diversity, and inclusion training, as well as implementing that into their HR policies and their social culture, their work culture. In an increasingly competitive labor market, it's important for employers to try and understand how to better tap into some of those underutilized labor pools. Implementing better equity, diversity, and inclusion practices within your workplace is an excellent place to start. We are finding in our community some very innovative examples of employers that are responding to their hiring and retention challenges by thinking and acting differently. That looks like better support for their workforce, more holistic understanding and implementation of quality of work supports amongst their workers, better mental health supports within their own organizations, and more flexibility in terms of how and where people work.